Hey there, I'm Hillary, and this is part 9 in our series on building a wood-framed raised bed garden. In this video, we're discussing pathways, and specifically, we're going to discuss different types of materials that you can use to cover your pathways in your vegetable garden.
All right, we're almost done with this garden project. The last step is to put down pathway material. There's a few things you want to think about when installing pathways. One, whether you want to put a sub-layer underneath your pathway material. Two, what that pathway material is going to be. And three, how thick the pathway material is going to be. So first, let's talk about sub-layers. A sub-layer is something that's just hidden underneath your pathway material. An example would be landscape fabric. Another example would be cardboard. Usually you're going to use a layer like this if you are concerned about weeds coming up. That's a very common concern, so it might be something you want to do. We highly recommend it. Landscape fabric is a good option. It is a synthetic material, and it will last for a very long time. One of the drawbacks of landscape fabric is that if seeds are falling down from the sky, which they will, and they land in your pathways and they find their way to get established, they will build a root system inside the landscape fabric. So removing them can be very difficult, especially if you go through a period of time where you're not maintaining your pathways very well. You can end up with just roots all bound through it, so it's very hard to deal with. We like to use compostable materials for this reason, because even though those materials will break down over time and sort of lose the advantage that you have of suppressing weeds, they should kill most or all of the weeds underneath them before they're completely gone. So cardboard is a very good option. If you still have newspaper, that's another good option. We're going to use cardboard here. When you're putting down any sublayer, it's important to just get full coverage. Anywhere you have seams where you don't get right up against your beds, or there's not a lot of overlap in the material, weeds will find their way up through that. So when you're putting down cardboard, put it down thickly. Put down a couple layers if you have enough cardboard available.
Speaking of maintenance, finished pathways help you access and care for your garden more easily. In addition to that, keeping weeds at bay in your pathways will also help keep them out of your garden beds. Also, if you have dirt pathways and you don't cover them, they will turn into mud, and that mud is going to splash up onto your garden beds.
The next thing to think about is the pathway material itself. So there's a few options. One, and the most complicated option, would be to put down flagstones. This will look very nice. However, it's the most expensive option and it takes more work. So if you're going to be putting down flagstones, I would highly recommend doing some research, because they perform best when they have a layer of gravel and then a layer of sand underneath them, and it's been tamped down and it doesn't settle that way. If you put down flagstones right on dirt or on some loose material, they will always be uneven and they're very difficult to walk on, and they'll move over time. Another option is to use gravel, so some sort of rock, and you can usually get crushed gravel or pea gravel. We recommend using crushed gravel. It settles down and sort of has a nice flat layer to it, so it's not easy to kick around. So when you're working in the garden, it stays in place. One of the issues with pea gravel, although it looks very nice, is that it's very easy to kick it around. So when you're walking through the garden, pebbles end up going flying all over the place. The third option is using an organic material. So examples might be wood chips or mulch, bark mulch. Either of those work really well, and we use them all the time. In this garden, we're going to be using cedar wood chips. So cedar wood chips may or may not be available where you are. Cedar is a nice option because cedar has naturally occurring oils that help prevent weeds coming up through it. So in this garden, we're going to be putting down cardboard and then putting cedar wood chips on top of it. The third thing to think about is how much pathway material you want or you have available to you. And thicker pathways are usually better because it means more weed suppression. In this situation, and in most situations, you're going to have some natural barrier around you that's going to dictate how thick you can make your pathway materials. We could obviously dig this down deeper if we wanted to get more wood chips on it. However, right now we have about 4 inches to work with. And so we're going to put down the cardboard and then put about 3 or 4 inches of wood chips on top of that. And our depth is going to be dictated by this driveway because we don't want our pathway materials spilling over the top of that. The last thing you might want to think about is whether or not you need any additional edging around your pathways. So in this site, because of the way that the pathways are graded, we have one edge where it butts up against the lawn. However, it's not a very aggressive lawn, so we're not going to be putting landscape edging in there. If you have a very aggressive, healthy lawn or something else that might be encroaching into your pathways, you might want to put in a landscape edging along all of those edges before you install your pathway materials. So, today it's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to break down some cardboard, layer it all over these pathways, and then just top it off with cedar wood chips, and then we'll be done.
Use the calculator in the show description to figure out how much pathway material you'll need for your space. For reference, this garden has about 80 square feet of pathways and they're about 4 inches deep, so that's about 1 cubic yard or 27 cubic feet of material.